Hey yo guys, what's up? Midway here and welcome to this video where we're gonna be looking at Tazavesh Sholia's Gambit. This is the second wing of Mythic Plus that we're getting in patch 9.2 and it contains the last 3 bosses of Tazavesh in Mythic 0. So we're gonna be looking at all the bosses and we're gonna be talking about the different trash packs and what they do, so let's go. So for starters, we gotta clear a bunch of Murlocs, and you don't really have to get as much percentage in this zone as you might have thought. There is a bunch of very important mechanics though you have to think about here, namely the Shoal Crushers will cast Cry of Murloc or whatever. They enrage all the nearby Murlocs by a bunch, and basically they deal more damage. They also have a shield bash ability basically, which will hit whatever the closest target is. So if you are kiting these Murlocs, watch out melee because you will get killed. Another thing that's important, of course, is the Fishmancers, those water bolts. They deal a ton of damage to the tank. Otherwise, they also cost some puffer fishes on the ground, which you can just move out of. And you have the Shorerunners, which basically will just run around. They don't do much. We also have the Wave Jumpers, which jump around and deal a bit of damage, but nothing too crazy of those. Then there's the Goliaths, which will deal a bunch of AoE damage, and they will apply a debuff. The next time they'll deal the AoE damage, you will take 100% increased damage, and it does stack per every single stack of the debuff, so those gotta be nuked down. Another important Murloc to think about is the Scale Binders. Those are the ones that will be dropping the fish sticks. The fish sticks cannot take AoE damage, so you gotta single target them. And they will basically be healing around all the Murlocs that they are close to them, and they will also be providing them with reduced damage taken. So we gotta focus those fish sticks as soon as possible. If you stun the fish stick cast, it will just be recasted right after, so you kinda just have to kill those fish sticks basically. We're done with the Murloc area, we go into the room of the first boss from this wing, and we have these Guardians, the Stormforge Guardians, which will be doing a massive AoE around them, and they usually stagger the AoE, so it's very melee unfriendly. You gotta basically move out of them for about 3 seconds every time they do the big AoE, so you can expect to be out of melee for quite a bit. And they also have these frontals, which basically spawn some sparks on the ground, which do some ticking damage, but the damage from that doesn't seem to be anything too crazy. If you stand on the big AoE circle though, you pretty much get one shot. First boss of this wing of the dungeon is called Hillbrande, I don't know, something like that. He does this beam of light which you gotta move out of instantly, and you ideally want to be kiting this throughout the edges of the room, but also be careful not to kite it on top of the consoles that you need to put some stuff during the intermission. You have these hats doing some casts that will do a lot of damage. The Battleless Bolts have to be interrupted, and whenever they cast Empowered Defense you have to stun them somehow, otherwise they will provide some damage reduction to the boss. And then of course there's the intermission. One person will go onto the console and tell the rest of the group where they have to go with each color, so that you can actually get through the intermission without getting killed by the growing circle of death in the middle of the room. The fight is nice, it just drags on for too long. Or rather, if it drags on for too long in Tyrannical, you will start to have some space problems. Although the yellow battles from the beams do despawn after a long time, so you can actually play this fight for as long as you want. It is not too hard, but if you have any DPS struggles with killing the ads, it will just keep on dragging on and on and on, and that's when you will die. After we deal with the boy Hillbrande, we go back to Boralos, and here we have a bunch of pirates doing pirate stuff. We have the Tide Sages casting some stuff onto the tank, and then they also cast these AoE pools on the ground, which you can obviously just move out of. But you also have the Burly Deckhands doing a massive AoE that you cannot do anything about. And they also enrage, so they deal 100% increased damage when that happens. That is after they cast the Super Saison and they get that buff. You can stun them, but you cannot interrupt anything, so you're just gonna be taking a lot of damage from these guys if you pull them all at the same time. In the room of the second boss, we have some more Tide Sages, we have some more Burly Deckhands, but we also have the officers that will be casting this frontal where they basically throw a bunch of swords, and it is actually not that easy to see, especially if you have all your nameplates covering the mobs like I do, which I should definitely be changing because this is PTR. But anyways, they do this frontal, and you just keep on getting hammered by those swords until you die. You just gotta move out of them before they actually start the cast, because you can pretty much easily just look at the mobs, see where they are aiming at, and just move out of that. Second boss is the Pirate Dragon, which basically is a clusterfuck fight with a lot of stuff on the ground, a lot of stuff to move out of, and very restrictive positioning for melee. You have the frontal, which you have to avoid, but also use to kill the mobs that will be spawning from the boat. And the mobs themselves, they fixate once they enrage, and I'm not actually sure if they also fixate before they do enrage as well. You have the tail swipe, which I just got hooked by there, which also applies a massive bleed, which you can bop off, but does a lot of damage, so you will basically die in 2 ticks of that if you get actually hooked. Then there is the bombs, which will be putting the floor on fire, so there's even less room to be moving through. And if that's not enough, you will also have a hook coming from the boat, which will be pulling you through all the shit that we already talked about towards the boat itself. So good luck melee, enjoy this fight. The last room of the dungeon, we have the accomplices and we have the ritualists. The accomplices will cast Energy Slash, increasing the damage taken by the tank from the same ability by a bunch of percent for every stack. So every time they cast it, they will apply a stack. And then they will also cast Reinvigorate, which can be interrupted and should be interrupted because will heal the accomplice by 50% of their HP and increase their haste by 50%. Although you can spell steal this buff, so you might want to see some of this go through so your mages can use the buff for themselves. And then you have the Ritualist, which will cast Unstable Rift. If that cast goes through, you basically wipe. It's a massive amount of AoE. And they will also cast Hyperlight Bolt, which just will deal some damage onto the tank as a single target spell. Last but not least, this is the last trash mobs in the dungeon. We have the the Star Seers. These do a frontal, which will basically just one-shot you, but it's pretty easy to see and move out of. It's called the Drifting Star, and then they will also cast the Wandering Pulsar, which will summon this Wandering Pulsar, which will start ticking for casually 10k every 0.5 seconds or even less, and you have 2 of those, so good luck killing those in time. They have more than 100k HP. This is fortified and only a 15, so you will die. The last boss of the dungeon couldn't be anybody else than Solia herself, since she is giving the name to this wing of Tazavesh. Although if you look at the Mythic Plus timer there, you can see that the last boss is actually so Asmi apparently. It's just a typo, but it's kind of funny. She will be summoning these assassins, which will be jumping out and casting this spell that needs to be interrupted, otherwise they will apply a massive dot to the entire group and they will basically just kill you. Solia will be casting Collapsing Stars, which need to be soaked, and then you get a debuff from doing that. You need to wait for this debuff to drop off and then soak it again. You gotta do that thing 4 times until the Collapsing Star actually disappears, otherwise it will just blow up and kill you. Now phase 1 actually does way more damage than phase 2. That is because there's also this spell, the Hyperlight Spark, that will basically be just bouncing from player to player, dealing an insane amount of damage, and that combined with the Collapsing Star just amounts to a lot more damage that you have to heal through in phase 1 than in phase 2. Then when you drop the boss to 40%, phase 2 will actually begin, so you're gonna make sure you transition with no ads spawning at that time, or ideally no ads alive. Solia drops below 40%, she will transition into phase 2, she will heal back up by 50% HP, and then you will have to play out this gimmick mechanic where you have to hit all the stars with the arrows, and if you fail you will have to do it again, and you will get a stack of a debuff, which will basically increase the damage you take from getting hit by the projectile coming out of the different arrows. And then the mechanic from the bouncy projectile that does a lot of damage in phase 1, that is gone, but instead it is replaced with this mechanic where she basically pops the stars that she uses in the gimmick mechanic, and you will have to dodge a bunch of projectiles coming out of them. The Collapsing Star mechanic is still playing out in this phase, but she will also be using Hyperlight Nova, creating these zones of death, which will basically one-shot you and denying you any uptime onto the boss. The healing requirements go down since the projectiles that you have to dodge do not do any damage themselves if you just basically dodge them, whereas in phase 1 there is no option to dodge anything, you will just be taking damage from that, but you basically have to be a lot more skillful to keep on some uptime onto this boss as you are dodging stuff, as you gotta move out of those big AoE circles. And then obviously playing out the gimmick mechanic every couple minutes, actually I don't know, I say like every minute or so. And yeah, that's the fight. It's actually pretty fun. It's actually the biggest heal check in the dungeon for sure, besides the Star Seers or the Wipe Seers. And yeah, that's it guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you find it useful. Let me know what you think about the dungeon, if you're looking forward to trying this for yourself. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.